Rain fell heavily over the quiet neighborhood, drumming on the roof of James Carter's mansion like 1,000 tiny hammers. The streets glistened with water, reflecting the yellow glow of streetlights. James, a man in his early 50s, known for his wealth and success, stood in the grand hall of his mansion, staring out the tall windows at the storm. He had lived in this house for years, a place of comfort, luxury, and solitude. Tonight, however, something felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a tension that he could not shake. He tried to focus on the gathering of his friends and colleagues in the living room, but the sound of the rain and the wind made him uneasy. The party was meant to be a celebration of his recent business achievements. Guests dressed in fine clothes moved through the rooms, laughing and raising glasses. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting the golden light across polished marble floors. Waiters moved silently, carrying trays of drinks and appetizers, their shoes tapping softly. It should have been a night of joy, yet James could not stop thinking about the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. He had always been a man of control, someone who believed that with enough planning and money, he could manage any situation. But tonight, that confidence seemed to falter. A part of him wondered if he had become too comfortable, too unaware of the world beyond his mansion walls. He tried to shake the thought away, blaming it on the storm, the wind, or perhaps the pressure of his business empire. It was then that he noticed her. At the edge of the driveway, partially hidden by the shadows of the rain, stood a young girl. She looked no older than 12, her small frame soaked by the downpour. Her hair clung to her face, dark and wet, and her clothes were muddy and torn in places. She stood perfectly still, as if frozen in the storm, her eyes wide and searching. James felt a flicker of surprise, then concern. It was unusual to see a child out in such terrible weather, alone. Without thinking too much, he stepped out of the hall and approached her, holding an umbrella. The girl's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was something in her gaze that made James pause. It was not fear of him, but a deep urgency, a warning he could feel in his bones. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, lowering the umbrella so she could see him better. She looked at him with a seriousness that made James's chest tighten. "Don't open that door," she said softly, almost a whisper, but the words carried a weight that startled him. James blinked. He expected fear or confusion, maybe a simple plea for help, but this was something different. Her voice was steady, yet trembling, and there was an urgency that made him pause. "Which door?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light, as if he were joking. She took a step back, glancing over her shoulder toward the mansion. "The door in the hallway, the one at the end." "Don't open it. Please," she said, her voice breaking slightly. James felt a shiver run down his spine. He had lived in this house for years. Every hallway, every room, every hidden corner was familiar to him. Yet, hearing a child speak with such certainty about a place he thought he knew completely filled him with unease. He wanted to smile, to reassure her that everything was fine, but something stopped him. The storm outside, the way she looked at him, the seriousness in her eyes, everything told him that this was not a simple misunderstanding. "Come inside," he said finally, opening the mansion door. "You shouldn't be out in this weather." The girl hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, her small shoes making soft splashes in the puddles. James guided her inside, shutting the door behind them. The warmth of the mansion hit her immediately, and she shivered as she looked around. The party continued in the background, laughter and music filling the air, but she barely noticed. Her attention remained on the hallway, her eyes never leaving the door she had warned him about. James offered her a towel and a warm drink, hoping to ease her nerves. She accepted silently, wrapping herself in the towel, but her gaze kept flicking toward the hallway. She clutched the mug with both hands, and her fingers were trembling. "What's your name?" James asked, trying to distract her. Maya, she replied simply, her voice small but firm. Well, Maya, can you tell me why you're so worried about that door? He asked, kneeling slightly to meet her at eye level. She hesitated, biting her lip. Her eyes darted to the door again, and then back at him. Someone is inside, she said finally, her voice barely audible. They're in trouble. Please, don't open it. James felt a knot in his stomach. He had always prided himself on being rational, careful, and in control, but this child's words shook him in a way he had never expected. The mansion had always been a place of safety and luxury, yet now it seemed like it held secrets even he did not know. He glanced around at his guests, who were laughing and unaware of the tension in the hallway. His staff, moving efficiently through the rooms, seemed oblivious. He realized that for all his wealth and power, there were things he could not control, and this realization made him uneasy. Why don't you tell me exactly what you saw? James asked gently. Maybe I can help. Maya shook her head. I don't know how, she said. I just know it's dangerous. They can't get out, and I don't know what will happen if someone opens the door. Her words were fragmented, but the fear behind them was clear. James could feel it in the tension in her small body, in the way her eyes darted constantly toward the hallway. He had a fleeting thought that perhaps she had imagined it, that her mind had created a story from the shadows of the storm, but the intensity of her fear made him doubt that. He decided to keep her close, walking slowly down the hallway with her. The mansion, once familiar and comforting, now seemed eerie in the dim light of the chandelier. Shadows stretched across the walls, distorted by the flickering candles and the rain tapping against the windows. Each step echoed in the hallway, and James felt a chill crawl up his spine. Just stay close to me, he said quietly. I won't let anything happen. Maya nodded, still trembling, but her trust in him was evident. James realized that the child's courage, her ability to speak so plainly and clearly despite her fear, was remarkable. He admired her bravery even as his mind raced with questions. How did she know? Why was she here? And most importantly, what could possibly be behind that door? The storm continued to rage outside, a constant reminder that the night was far from ordinary. Guests continued their conversations, unaware of the tension building near the end of the hallway. James felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Something was hidden in his mansion, something he had never noticed before, and a small child had seen it. He looked at Maya and saw determination in her eyes, despite her fear. He realized that sometimes courage comes from the most unexpected places, from those we least expect. And tonight, that courage had chosen to appear in the form of a young girl standing in the rain, warning him about a door he had never thought twice about. James knew that this night, this storm, and this warning would change everything. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a certainty that there was no turning back. Whatever lay behind that door, whatever secrets had been hidden for years, would soon reveal itself and nothing would ever be the same again. As he walked back toward the warmth of the living room, he glanced once more at the door. It seemed ordinary, plain even, yet the unease it inspired was undeniable. He wondered what stories, what truths, had been kept behind it for so long. And he knew, deep down, that the warning had come not by chance, but by fate. Maya sipped her warm drink, watching him carefully. Her eyes were alert, her senses sharp, as if she were ready for what was to come. James realized that he needed her guidance, her courage, and her warning to navigate the events of the night. Without her, he might have walked blindly into danger. With her, there was a chance to uncover the truth safely. The rain continued to fall, steady and relentless, as the mansion seemed to hold its breath. The laughter of the party now felt distant, like it belonged to another world. The storm outside mirrored the storm of uncertainty inside, and James understood that this was only the beginning. Maya's warning echoed in his mind, "Don't open that door." And he knew, somehow, that the door would have to be opened. The only question was when and what would be waiting on the other side. James could not stop thinking about Maya's warning. The little girl's words kept repeating in his mind, "Don't open that door." There was something in the way she said it, calm but serious, urgent but controlled, that made him feel both nervous and responsible at the same time. He had dealt with danger and business risks all his life, but this was different. This wasn't a business problem he could solve with money, connections, or clever negotiation. This was something human, something urgent. He walked with her slowly through the mansion, careful to keep his voice low so the guests would not notice. Maya's small hand clung to his, her fingers trembling slightly, but she held on as if she understood the importance of staying close. James felt a strange sense of trust in her. Even though she was a child, she seemed wiser than many adults he had met. There was clarity in her fear that he could not ignore. "Tell me more about what you saw, Maya," James said gently. "I need to understand so I can help." "Can you describe it?" Maya hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway and then back at James. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was thinking, struggling to find words. Finally, she whispered, I heard someone crying. They were scared. And I think they've been there a long time. I don't know how long exactly, but it felt like forever. I couldn't leave them there, but I was scared too." James felt a chill. The thought that someone could be trapped inside his mansion, in danger, without anyone knowing, made his stomach turn. He tried to imagine how it was possible. His mansion had security cameras, alarms, and staff who patrolled every corner. Yet here was a little girl, wet from the rain, who had discovered something that everyone else had missed. "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" James asked carefully, crouching down to her level. "Why come to me?" Maya looked down at her shoes, her voice barely audible. "I tried. I didn't know who to tell. People might not believe me. They might get angry. But I knew you would listen. You always listen." James felt a mix of surprise and guilt. He had always prided himself on being approachable, kind, and generous, but this moment made him realize how easy it was to assume that children could not understand serious matters. Maya's courage and instinct proved otherwise. He led her to a quiet corner of the mansion where the storm's noise was softer, hoping the girl would feel more comfortable speaking. He offered her a blanket, and she accepted it, shivering as the warmth touched her skin. "Can you tell me exactly where the door is?" James asked. He wanted to visualize it clearly. Maya pointed with her small, trembling hand down the hallway, to a plain wooden door that seemed ordinary to any observer. But James could sense the tension around it, the way shadows seemed to gather near its edges. "That's the door," she said softly. "It's locked. I tried the handle. It wouldn't move. I think someone is trapped inside. Please, don't open it yet. Not until we know what to do." James nodded, absorbing her words. He knew he needed more information before taking action. It was one thing to investigate a possible danger, it was another to rush blindly into a situation that could be life-threatening. The thought of a child being right about something he could not see made him cautious, but he also knew he could not ignore it. He decided to check the security cameras near that hallway. Quietly, he slipped into the security room with Maya following closely behind. The screens glowed with blue light, showing different angles of the mansion. James paused, scanning the footage carefully. Most of it showed empty hallways, the storm outside reflected in the windows. But then, on one camera, he noticed movement. Shadows flickered near the end of the hallway, where Maya had been pointing. James leaned closer, squinting at the grainy images. "Do you see that?" he asked Maya. She nodded, pointing. "Yes. That's where I heard the crying." The shadows moved strangely, almost as if someone were pacing back and forth. James could not make out a face or a figure clearly, but the feeling of urgency intensified. His heart raced. The mansion, which had always felt like a safe and controlled environment, now seemed uncertain and mysterious. He turned to Maya. "We need to be careful," he said. "I think you're right. There's someone there. But we need a plan before opening the door. Can you stay calm for a little longer?" Maya nodded, her eyes wide but determined. She seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Even though she was small, she carried a sense of responsibility that James found inspiring. He realized that this was not just about wealth, security, or status. This was about doing what was right. James took a deep breath and walked back toward the hallway, motioning for Maya to follow. The party continued in the distance, laughter and music filling the rooms, oblivious to the tension building at the end of the corridor. He felt a strange mix of anticipation and fear. The air seemed heavier now, as if the house itself knew something was about to change. He looked at the door again. It was ordinary, plain wood with a simple handle. Yet Maya's warning gave it an ominous presence. James thought about the possibility of someone being trapped for hours, maybe days. His stomach tightened at the thought of what that person had endured. "Can you remember what the person sounded like?" James asked. "Were they a boy or a girl? How old do you think they were?" Maya shook her head slowly. "I don't know. It was just someone crying. It was soft, scared. I couldn't see them. The door was closed. But I could hear them, and it made me feel, I don't know, heavy. Like something bad was happening and no one knew." James nodded, understanding her meaning. He had always dealt with numbers, contracts, and deals, but this was human in a way he had rarely faced. Someone was suffering in his house, and only a child had noticed. He motioned for Maya to stay close as he considered the next step. He thought about calling the authorities immediately, but he also knew that rushing them into the mansion without a plan could be risky. There were guests to consider, the storm outside, and the unknown dangers inside the door. James decided to do something simple but effective. He would check the hallway quietly, listening for any signs of movement or sound. Maya would stay nearby, guiding him with her intuition. He realized that sometimes instinct and observation mattered more than wealth, experience, or authority. They walked slowly down the hallway together. The chandelier's light created long shadows that stretched across the walls, and the polished floor reflected their cautious steps. Each echo of their footsteps seemed louder than it should, emphasizing the silence and tension. Maya paused occasionally, her eyes fixed on the door. James noticed her small hand grip the blanket tightly, her knuckles white. He felt a mixture of protectiveness and admiration. Despite her fear, she had guided him this far, and he knew her instincts were not to be underestimated. As they approached the door, James could feel the atmosphere change. The air seemed colder, heavier, almost alive with tension. He could sense the possibility of someone trapped inside, someone who had been waiting for help. He paused, looking at Maya. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her small face serious and unwavering. "Yes," she said. "But please, be careful." James took a deep breath, preparing himself for what he might find. He knew that opening this door could change everything, not just for him, but for Maya, the person inside, and perhaps even the guests and staff in the mansion. The warning had been clear, and now it was time to act with care, courage, and respect for the unknown. The rain continued to fall outside, relentless and steady, as if marking the passage of time. The mansion, which had always been a place of comfort and control, now held a secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. James understood that the events of this night would not be easily forgotten. The warning of a little girl had set in motion a series of actions that would test his courage, judgment, and humanity in ways he could never have imagined. Maya's warning echoed in his mind, "Don't open that door." But James knew that they could not ignore it. The door could hold answers, danger, or both. And he also knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever was behind it would change their lives forever. James's hand rested on the wooden door handle. He felt the smooth wood under his fingers and the cold metal of the lock. Every instinct in his body told him to be careful, but another voice, a deeper one, reminded him that he had to act. Someone was in trouble, someone might have been trapped for hours or even days, and he could not ignore it. Maya stood beside him, shivering slightly from the cold and fear. Her small hand gripped his sleeve, holding on tightly. Her wide eyes never left the door. There was a mixture of fear and determination in her gaze. James realized that this little girl had more courage than many adults he knew. She had seen danger, felt it, and had acted to protect someone else. That alone earned his respect. James took a deep breath. He knew he needed to prepare. He could not rush blindly. He crouched slightly and whispered, "Maya, stay close to me. If something happens, I'll protect you." "Okay." Maya nodded, her teeth chattering slightly, but her eyes never wavered from the door. "I'm ready," she whispered. He turned the handle slowly. It did not budge. The lock clicked, but the door seemed stuck, as if it had been reinforced or sealed from the inside. James frowned. Something about it felt deliberate, almost like someone did not want anyone to enter. He pushed lightly, and then with a bit more force. The door creaked, making a sound that echoed through the silent hallway. From inside, they heard a faint noise. A soft whimper, almost too quiet to detect, but James and Maya froze instantly. They both knew it was real. Someone was behind that door. Someone was scared. James motioned for Maya to step back slightly. "I'm going to open it slowly. Keep your eyes on me, and don't move too far," he whispered. Maya nodded, holding onto his sleeve with both hands. With careful pressure, James pushed the door open just a crack. A sliver of light from the hallway spilled into the room beyond, revealing a dark, small space. It smelled damp and old, a mix of dust and something faintly metallic. The whimpering grew louder, and James realized it was coming from a small corner of the room. He pushed the door open a little more. Shadows danced along the walls as the chandelier light from the hallway fell into the room. And then he saw them, a young man, maybe in his 20s, curled up on the floor. His clothes were torn and dirty, and his face had streaks of tears. He looked exhausted, frightened, and weak. The young man's eyes widened when he saw James. "Please, don't hurt me," he whispered, his voice trembling. James raised his hand slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help," he said calmly. "You're safe now. Can you stand up?" The young man shook his head. I can't. I've been here too long. They locked me in." James's stomach twisted. He had expected someone scared, but the thought that someone had deliberately been locked in his mansion without anyone noticing was shocking. He glanced at Maya, whose small face was serious but calm. She seemed proud that her warning had led them here. James knelt beside the young man. "Who locked you in?" he asked gently. "Can you tell me what happened?" The young man swallowed hard, trying to control his shaking. I worked for the party last night. I was supposed to help with the decorations. But someone didn't like me. They said I was slow, useless, then they locked me in here when everyone else left. I tried to scream, but no one heard me. I thought no one would find me." James's heart sank. How could anyone be cruel enough to do this? And in his own house, no less. He felt a deep responsibility. He should have known. His mansion had rules, but he had never imagined that someone could suffer like this under his roof. "Don't worry," James said firmly. "You're safe now. We'll get you out." He offered his hand. The young man hesitated for a moment, then grabbed it. James helped him stand. The young man was weak, but he could walk with support. Maya stayed close, her hand brushing against the young man's arm, giving him silent encouragement. James looked around the room. It was empty except for some old furniture and boxes stacked in the corner. No one else was inside. The young man's fear was clear in his eyes, and James realized they needed to move fast, get him somewhere safe and warm. He guided the young man back toward the hallway, with Maya following. The young man leaned slightly on James's shoulder, exhausted from being trapped. James could feel the tension and fear radiating from him, and it made him more determined to protect him. As they walked, James called the staff. "Tell them to get blankets, hot drinks, and anything to make him comfortable. No one goes near him without my permission," he instructed. The staff nodded and quickly moved into action. James appreciated their efficiency, but he knew that this was not about service or protocol. This was about human care. Maya walked beside James, her small hand holding onto his sleeve. She looked at the young man with empathy and concern. James noticed the way her eyes softened, even after all the fear she had faced. It was a reminder that courage did not always mean being fearless, it meant acting despite fear, helping others, and standing up for what was right. Once they reached the living room, the staff had set up a comfortable spot with blankets and warm drinks. The young man sat down, still trembling, but safe for the first time in hours. James handed him a cup of tea. The warmth of the liquid seemed to calm him slightly, though his eyes still reflected deep anxiety. "Take your time," James said gently. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you." The young man nodded, tears welling up again. "Thank you," he whispered. I thought no one would find me." James placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We found you. That's what matters. You're not alone anymore." Maya sat nearby, still wrapped in her blanket, watching carefully. James realized how much she had contributed to this rescue. If it weren't for her courage and observation, they might never have discovered the young man. She had seen what others ignored, listened when adults doubted, and acted with wisdom beyond her years. After a few minutes, the young man's breathing began to steady. The initial shock had passed, but he was still pale and weak. James made a decision. "We need to know who did this," he said firmly. "And we need to make sure it never happens again." The young man looked down, hesitant. I don't want anyone to get in trouble," he said quietly. "I just want to be safe." James nodded. "I understand. But safety also means making sure no one else is hurt. We'll handle it carefully." He turned to Maya. "You did the right thing, Maya. Your warning saved him. Never doubt yourself." Maya smiled faintly, a little proud despite her shivering. I just knew something was wrong," she said simply. James felt a deep respect for her. It was rare to meet someone, especially a child, who could see danger, understand it, and act responsibly. He realized that courage was not about age, size, or experience. It was about seeing the truth and choosing to act, even when fear is present. The young man finally looked up at James and Maya. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice steadier now. You saved me." James shook his head. "No thanks needed. You're alive, and that's what matters." He sat down nearby, still alert, thinking about what had happened and what was next. He knew that this night had changed something inside him. He had always believed that wealth and power could solve problems, but now he understood that human care, attention, and courage mattered more. Maya leaned against James slightly, exhausted but calm. She had done what she needed to do, and she had helped someone in need. James felt a strange warmth, a mixture of pride, relief, and humility. The young man sipped his tea, still trembling, but gradually more comfortable. James knew they would need to stay with him until he felt safe. And later, they would find out who had locked him in the room and why. But for now, the important thing was that he was alive, and that Maya's warning had made all the difference. As the storm continued outside, the mansion seemed quieter, almost as if it, too, was relieved. James realized that the events of this night had changed the house, the young man, Maya, and even himself. Something had shifted. Something had reminded him of the importance of listening, of paying attention, of caring beyond appearances and assumptions. And James knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The door had been opened, the danger revealed, and the journey of understanding and responsibility had just begun. The next morning, the mansion felt different. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but it did not bring warmth to James's mind. He had spent the night awake, thinking about the young man who had been trapped and about Maya, whose warning had changed everything. The quiet halls of the mansion, usually so peaceful, now seemed heavy with the unspoken questions of last night. James walked slowly to the living room, where the young man was sitting with a blanket around his shoulders. He looked calmer now, sipping tea from a large mug, but the dark circles under his eyes told the story of fear and exhaustion. James sat beside him, careful not to startle him. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. The young man looked at him and tried to smile, but it was weak. "Better, I guess. Still a little scared," he admitted. "I didn't think anyone would come." James nodded, understanding perfectly. "You're safe now. No one will hurt you here. We will make sure of that." Maya entered quietly, holding a small notebook she had brought with her. Her eyes were tired, but she still carried that quiet determination that had surprised James. I wrote down what I saw last night," she said softly. "Maybe it can help find out who did this." James's eyebrows lifted. "That's very smart, Maya. Let's take a look." She handed over the notebook, which contained careful notes about the hallway, the door, and the sounds she had heard. She had even drawn a small map of the mansion's layout as she remembered it, marking the staircases, doors, and the room where the young man had been trapped. James studied it. "This is very helpful," he said. "You have a sharp eye, Maya. This might be the key to figuring out who was behind this." Maya smiled faintly, proud that her observation mattered. The young man looked between them, grateful but still unsure. I don't want anyone to get in trouble," he said again. "I just want to be safe and leave this behind me." James nodded slowly. "I understand. But safety also means making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. We can handle it carefully, without putting you at risk." They decided to start by retracing the young man's steps the previous night. He described how he had entered the mansion to help with the decorations, the people he had interacted with, and where he had been asked to place certain items. He spoke quietly, his voice calm but serious, and James realized that every word was a clue. Maya listened carefully, occasionally asking questions to clarify. Her small voice was steady, and her eyes were sharp. James admired her focus. She had shown bravery in the dark, and now she was showing intelligence in the light. After listening, James stood up. "We need to check the security cameras and see who was near the room last night. That will tell us who might have locked the door." The staff quickly brought the security system to the living room. James and Maya watched the monitors with intense concentration. Footage showed people moving around the mansion, staff members, decorators, and others who had access that evening. Finally, a shadow caught James's eye. A man in a dark suit lingered near the hallway where the young man had been trapped. He moved quickly, making sure no one was watching, and then disappeared from the camera's view. James froze. "There," he said, pointing at the screen. "See that? He's the one who might have locked the door." Maya leaned closer, her eyes wide. "I saw him last night," she said. "He was acting strange. I didn't know what he was doing, but I felt something was wrong." James nodded. "You were right, Maya. Your instincts saved the young man. Now we have proof." The next step was confrontation, but James knew it had to be done carefully. He could not accuse anyone without evidence, and he needed to protect both Maya and the young man. He decided to speak privately with the mansion manager first. The manager, a tall man with a calm demeanor, followed James to his office. "I saw the footage," James said quietly. "We have a problem. Someone used this mansion to harm a guest. I need your help to find out who it was and make sure it never happens again." The manager nodded solemnly. "I will do everything I can. We take safety seriously here. No one should feel unsafe, especially not in your home." James and the manager spent hours reviewing the footage and cross-referencing it with staff records and the young man's account. Every detail mattered: who had keys, who had access to the room, who had been near the hallway. Slowly, the pieces came together. Finally, they identified the man. He was a contractor hired for the decorations, known for being impatient and careless. He had been reprimanded before for minor issues, and James realized that his temper had escalated into something dangerous. James took a deep breath. He had to confront the man, but he had to do it calmly. Anger would not solve the problem. He had to be precise, careful, and fair. When the man arrived later that afternoon, James greeted him politely. "We need to talk about what happened last night," he said firmly. The man's face went pale. I don't know what you mean," he stammered. James showed him the footage and explained the events, step by step. The man's voice shook as he tried to deny it, but the evidence was clear. Finally, he broke down. "I didn't mean. I was angry. I just wanted to scare him. I didn't think he would." "I'm sorry," he said, tears in his eyes. James listened, maintaining his calm. "Anger is never an excuse. You endangered someone's life. Actions have consequences. You will not work here again, and we will make sure this does not happen to anyone else." The man nodded, ashamed, understanding the seriousness of his mistake. James turned to Maya and the young man, both of whom had been quietly observing. They had not seen the confrontation, but they could feel the tension in the air. James then focused on the young man. "You are safe now. No one will hurt you, and we have taken steps to ensure your safety. You don't need to be afraid anymore." The young man nodded, a small smile forming. "Thank you, for everything," he said. I I never thought I would get out of that room alive." Maya stepped forward and gently touched his shoulder. "You're strong," she said. "You survived, and that's what matters." James felt a sense of relief wash over him. The immediate danger was over, and he knew that both Maya and the young man had shown courage that night. He also realized that this experience had changed him. He had learned that wealth and power were not enough, vigilance, care, and empathy were just as important. The young man stayed for a while, resting and recovering. James made sure he had food, warmth, and comfort. Maya sat nearby, watching him with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had helped save someone's life, and now she could see the result of her courage. As the day went on, James walked through the mansion, thinking about the events of the past night and morning. He thought about the people he trusted, the rules of his house, and the importance of paying attention to small details. He knew that danger often came in unexpected ways, and that courage could appear in the smallest and most surprising forms. That evening, James called a meeting with the mansion staff. He wanted to ensure everyone understood the seriousness of what had happened. He spoke about responsibility, vigilance, and caring for others. He also praised Maya, acknowledging her bravery in saving the young man. The staff listened carefully, some surprised by the story, others inspired. James's words reminded them that every action mattered, and that even small observations could prevent harm. Maya felt proud as she listened. Her courage had been recognized, and more importantly, it had made a real difference in someone's life. She realized that she could make a difference, no matter how small she felt. James returned to his office, reflecting on the lessons of the day. He understood that the events of the night had changed him forever. He had faced danger, protected someone in need, and discovered the quiet courage of a young girl. He realized that true strength was not just in wealth, influence, or power, but in compassion, vigilance, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. As he looked out the window at the darkening sky, he felt a sense of calm. The danger had passed, but the experience would stay with him. He knew he had a responsibility to protect those around him, to listen, and to act with care and courage. And he knew one more thing: Maya, the young girl who had warned him, would always remind him of the power of courage and observation, even in the smallest and most unexpected forms. The following morning, the mansion felt lighter. The tension from the past nights had eased, but the lessons and memories remained. James walked through the halls with a sense of purpose, noticing details he had once ignored: the way sunlight hit the polished floors, the sound of birds outside the tall windows, the quiet hum of the mansion that now felt more like a home than a fortress. Maya was already in the garden, her notebook open as she sketched small flowers she liked. She looked up when James approached, and a small smile crossed her face. "Good morning," she said. Her voice carried warmth, and James realized that courage and calm could exist side by side. "Good morning," he replied. "I wanted to thank you again, Maya. You really saved someone's life, and your observations helped more than you know." Maya shook her head softly. "I just did what felt right. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I was scared, but I knew I had to speak up." James nodded, understanding completely. "That's real bravery. Most people wouldn't act when they felt fear. You did." The young man appeared from the kitchen, now dressed neatly and looking much more relaxed than the night before. He carried a cup of tea, and his eyes brightened when he saw James and Maya. I I can't thank you enough," he said, voice steady but emotional. "I never thought anyone would notice or care about what happened. I feel safe now, and it's because of you both." James gestured for him to sit beside them. "You survived because you stayed calm and trusted someone would help. That's important too. Courage isn't just about facing danger, it's also about believing that help exists, even when it feels impossible." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, watching the morning sun move across the garden. There was peace, but also a quiet understanding that life could change in an instant, and that courage, care, and attention mattered more than ever. James decided it was time to make changes in the mansion. He called a staff meeting, making sure that everyone understood the importance of safety and vigilance. He explained the events carefully, without pointing fingers unnecessarily, emphasizing the need to protect guests and each other. "Every person here has a responsibility," he said, looking around at the attentive faces. "Our actions can prevent harm. Attention to detail, kindness, and courage are more important than anything else. And sometimes, the smallest voice can make the biggest difference." Maya listened quietly, proud that her actions were being acknowledged publicly. She realized that her courage had not only saved someone but also influenced others to act with care. The young man nodded along, feeling reassured that everyone in the mansion now understood how fragile safety could be and how much their actions mattered. Later in the day, James and Maya decided to review the security measures and make improvements. They walked together through the halls, checking locks, cameras, and emergency exits. James asked for Maya's opinions, valuing her sharp mind and perspective. "See this hallway?" Maya said, pointing to a long corridor. "It's easy to miss if you're in a hurry. Maybe a camera here, and better lighting, would make it safer." James smiled. "You're right. Small details like this can save lives. You have an eye for what matters." As they moved through the mansion, the young man joined them, more confident now. He suggested simple improvements too, and James realized that courage and wisdom could come from anyone, regardless of age or experience. By late afternoon, the mansion felt transformed not just in safety, but in atmosphere. There was a renewed sense of community, of shared responsibility, and of trust. James knew that fear would not define their home, and that courage, observation, and care would guide them forward. As evening approached, James invited Maya and the young man to the balcony, overlooking the gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The moment felt quiet, peaceful, and full of reflection. "You know," James began, "last night taught me more than I ever expected. Wealth and power are nothing without awareness and empathy. Courage can appear in the most unexpected forms, and it can change lives." Maya looked at him thoughtfully. "I learned that too. Even someone small, or young, can make a difference. And sometimes, listening to your instincts matters more than anything else." The young man nodded, his voice soft. "I learned that being afraid doesn't mean you are weak. It means you are human. But trusting others, and trusting that someone will help, can give you the strength to survive." James smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The mansion, the staff, and the people he cared about were safer now. But more importantly, he understood that life was not just about protection, it was about noticing, caring, and acting when it mattered most. That night, as the mansion grew quiet, James sat in his office, reflecting on the events. He thought about the young man, who had faced fear with courage. He thought about Maya, whose quick thinking and bravery had saved a life. And he thought about himself, realizing that true leadership meant responsibility, empathy, and awareness, not just money or influence. He picked up the notebook Maya had given him, filled with notes and sketches. He read through it again, marveling at her attention to detail, her care, and her determination. He understood that life often gave lessons in unexpected ways, and that the smallest actions could have the largest impact. Before heading to bed, James sent a message to the young man, letting him know that he could come back anytime, that he would always be welcome, and that his courage had not gone unnoticed. The young man replied quickly, thanking him and promising to stay safe, feeling a new sense of hope and confidence. Maya, too, received a private note from James, expressing gratitude and admiration. He reminded her that her instincts, courage, and intelligence had changed the course of events, and that she should never doubt her ability to make a difference. As James finally lay down to rest, he felt a calm he had not known before. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. Courage, care, empathy, and attention to detail could change lives. And sometimes, the smallest voice in a quiet moment could save the day. In the following days, the mansion returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of what had happened lingered. Staff members were more aware, guests were safer, and the young man and Maya had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. The experience had bonded them in an invisible, powerful way, reminding them that life could be fragile, but courage and care were strong enough to protect it. James walked through the gardens one morning, watching Maya sketch and the young man help with the flowers. He felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond money or influence. Life had given him a reminder, the value of courage, observation, and compassion, and the importance of acting when it mattered most. He smiled, thinking about how one small warning, Maya's words, had changed everything. Without her courage to speak up, the outcome could have been very different. But now, the mansion was safe, lives were protected, and lessons had been learned that would last forever. As the sun rose higher, James realized that life would continue to bring challenges, but he was ready. With people like Maya and the young man by his side, and with the lessons learned from the past days, he understood that danger could be faced, fear could be overcome, and courage could shine through in even the smallest moments. And with that, the mansion felt alive again, not just as a building, but as a place where bravery, care, and human kindness could make a difference every single day.